بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطاهرين ما دام ما في السماوات والأرضين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. كيف حالكم؟ Alhamdulillah, the periods have been changed around somewhat today. Not changed around, somewhat delayed. There was a janaza, and then our time frames got a bit mixed up. But inshallah, for what is left of this period, we'll try to make the best of it. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. Actions are judged by their endings. It's important to keep the intention in mind, but also the ending in mind as well. So we have all of 5 minutes or 10 minutes, inshallah. So we'll do our level best, inshallah. وَخِتَامُهُ مِسْكٍ. Please remind me where we stopped. Ayah number 5. So ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Okay, so excellent. We'll do that now, inshallah. Just to remind yourself and myself about the theme of Surah At-Teen. What is the theme of Surah At-Teen? Qudratullah, the power of Allah. And the power of Allah manifests itself in different ways. The first 3 verses spoke about Allah creates the fig, Allah creates the olive, Allah created Mount Sinai, and Allah created this blessed city referring to Makkah. That's the first manifestation of the power of Allah. The second manifestation, and now Allah's talking about something increasingly greater that requires a greater degree of power, and He says, indeed we created man fi ahsani taqweem, in the best of forms. In the best of forms. Now Allah continues today and He says, ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. So we're going to do what Ibn Abbas refers to as Tafsirul Arab. You know, the literal Arabic explanation of the verse. So the word thumma, what does thumma mean? Thumma means then, okay? But to give us a better understanding perhaps, in the Arabic language, there are 3 letters that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would use. Number 1 is wa. What does wa mean? And. The next one is fa, which means then or so. And the last one is thumma. Wa, fa, and thumma. Okay? Now, when in Arabic you use the term wa, it means one after the other. It doesn't imply sequence. When you use the term wa in Arabic, it doesn't imply sequence. So if I tell you akaltu, so what does akala mean? He ate. So akala, akalu. The last 2 is akaltu. So what does akaltu mean? I ate. Okay. So I ate Mawzan. Mawz means banana. Wa, and tufahan, and an apple. You with me? The fact that I'm using wa means I ate both, but it doesn't imply sequence. You follow me? Wa means and, it doesn't imply sequence. You follow? Everybody okay with that? Okay, can we go on to the next one? Fa. Fa means and, but it implies sequence. So when I say to you now, akaltu mawzan fatufahan, I ate a banana, then in terms of sequence, an apple. So the banana came first and then the apple. You with me? Okay. So wa means and, fa means then. Does it imply sequence? Yes. Now we come to what we are busy with now. Thumma. Thumma means then. It implies sequence. But the difference between thumma and fa is that thumma refers to a big gap. You with me? Thumma, for example, I tell you, today what is my program? I tell you this evening, ذهبت إلى المدرسة. I went to school. ثم then إلى المسجد. Then I went to the masjid. Because I came to school at 8 o'clock and I went to the masjid at 1 o'clock. There's a long gap. The sequence, yes, but there's a long gap. You with me? So thumma implies sequence, but a gap. Everybody with me? It's very unique to understand, because Quran mentions things but not in a long-winded way. You follow? Quran mentions things but not in a long-winded way. It uses instruments like thumma, where you can understand the sequence, but you follow? So now look at the previous verse. لَقَدْ خَلَقَنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We created man in the best of forms. Then, which happens now when? In infancy or in adulthood? In adulthood. And what tells you that what happens now is in adulthood? The word thumma. Because thumma talks about a sequence, and there's a gap in the sequence. You with me? So let's go back to the previous verse. You need to be following me here, because Allah says, لَقَدْ خَلَقَنَا. Indeed, we created al-insan, man, in the best of forms. This happens. When does it happen? Infancy. Thumma, then. So what Allah talks about now, is there a sequence? Yes. Is there a gap? Yes. So it doesn't happen in infancy, it happens in adulthood. Thumma, then. What happens? Radadnahu. Now, do you recognize that verb? Radadna. Okay. Wrong question. Do you recognize the form? The form. Radadna, fa'alna. Everybody with me? Radadna, fa'alna. So the word radada, ra, dal and dal. What do the Arabs normally do? When you have two letters that are exactly the same, what do they do with it? They merge it. So it becomes radda, yaruddu. But Allah, who has, let's call it poetic license, Allah can do and undo things. Right? So Allah says now, I'm going to say radadna. Radadtu, radadna. You with me? Which means to return. Thumma then, radadna, we returned. And then you have the pronoun who attached to the verb. Radadnahu, then we returned him. We created him in the best of forms. Then we returned him. Asfala. Asfala. The word asfala, the root letters are sin, fa, lam, which means to be at the bottom. Asfal, safal means to be low. Asfal, lowest. Lowest. It's on the form of af'al, like akbar, the greatest. Kabir, akbar. Safal, asfal, lowest. And the last word, thumma radadnahu, then we returned him to the lowest. Safilin, safil on the scale of fa'il, safilin, ina at the end, safilin, to the lowest of the low. Is everybody okay with that? You understand the verse? What lessons do we glean here from? What lessons do we learn? Bismillah. We created man in the best of forms, and then we returned him to the lowest of the low. What is Allah saying to us? And this is unique. And you know, if we had time, you and I, we could do an entire study of the Quran just from this particular perspective. And okay, let's tie it into the theme of the surah. What is the theme of the surah? Power. So the first manifestation of power is what? In created entities in general, right? And the second manifestation is the power of Allah in terms of how He created you. And if you look at that and you explore it further, it is the fact that Allah, due to His greatness, has created within you, right, the potential for good and the potential for bad. This speaks of the greatness of Allah. That in one given entity, Allah has created the potential for greatness. And Allah created the same potential for the entire opposite. You can become the highest of the high, you can surpass the angels, or you can become the lowest of the low, and you can become even worse than animals. What does it talk about? It tells us in terms of psychology, the very nature of ourselves. We have the potential for great good, but we have an equal potential for the opposite. This is important. And Allah in His, like they say, there's an English saying that goes around, that you know, there are two wolves that dwell within. One is a good wolf and the one is a bad wolf. Which wolf would gain the upper hand? The one that you feed. You with me? This is what Allah is saying over here. You have the potential. We always sometimes say, you know, I'm a good person. Yes, you are a good person because you have the potential for good. But you also have the potential for bad. And that is why we must be wary of ourselves. So what did Allah create within? If you really want to unpack this, there's a lot to unpack. Because Allah has, within you, Allah has created a heart. And the heart is the neutral ground within. But there are two opposing forces contending for a right over the heart. And the good force is what we refer to as the spirit, ruh. And then there's a negative force that also seeks to gain the upper hand over the heart. And that is the nafs. Everybody with me? So, you know, in Quran even, and if you look at it from another perspective, the Arabic language is unique in this regard. And how Allah is the creator of languages also. Many times in Quran, Allah uses one term that can refer to two mutually exclusive things, which tells you a lot about, not only about Arabic, but in this particular verse, our psychological makeup. Because we have potentials for good and potential for bad. May Allah cause that potential for good to rise. You with me? And that is what, and only Allah can do that in one thing. You can't make one thing black and white at the same time. You can't make it hot and cold at the same time. You can, but Allah has this power and ability in the way that He created us, this potential for good and potential for bad. And the Arabic language supports that. If I give you extraneous examples, Allah talks about وَشَرَوْهُ. And sharaw means to buy. Shara, if you look up in the lexical dictionary, it means to buy. But if you look in this particular context of the verse, it means to sell. But they're two mutually exclusive things, isn't it? But Allah uses one term to refer to two things. I think the important thing again is when you apply that idea of where one thing can potentially mean two different things, and you apply it here, we can psychologically gain a better understanding of our internal makeup. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I'm just wondering, I had a book I picked up the other day. It's called Ilmun Nafs fil Quran. So not too thick a book. It talks about psychology in the Quran. You know, and we like to keep things simple. You know, like we like to be simple. But at the same time, whilst we are simple, we are also quite complex. And I think, you know, trying to understand our psychological makeup from a Western perspective only, right? It's like throwing fuel to the fire. I'm saying that Allah who created us, He knows how we work psychologically. So to get an understanding of the psychology of Quran, because the Quran is in a way a book of guidance, but guidance, the person involved, so what's the psyche behind the person involved? So that positive type of psychology, when you want to look at it, look to the Quran and you're going to get a very good basic idea of what positive psychology is. You with me? If I can maybe give an extended example, and we'll end off on this verse, we can't go beyond this in terms of the Arabic. I give example of, I've been told that as a Muslim community, or just in general, people suffer from depression.